Hello everybody and welcome to Organian's Puzzle Box. I've decided to make this video due to popular demand on showcasing how to set up in Blender this particular render that you see behind me. I'm not going to go through much detail, I'm just going to do some basic setups of the HDRI and how to set up the lighting and everything else in the scene. Everything should be quite straightforward and simple to understand. Now bear in mind that I've used two different renders for this video, using the Eevee engine, but I'm also using Marmoset toolbag to get some, better, more refined results. Now, Eevee and Marmoset, there's a clear difference between them. Eevee is definitely offering you a lot more options when it comes to how to deploy your meshes and so on, just because it is an actual modeling engine. While, it's a modeling software which contains the Eevee engine, while Marmoset only allows you to set up the scene. But we're not looking at Marmoset today, we're only looking at Blender and how to set up your HDRIs, blur the background, and get some really nice and crisp results. So let's begin. Okay guys, so we're in Blender now with the model, and I want to get the setup of the Eevee engine so it looks like in the render. Now, some of the settings that I've done is activate ambient occlusion. I don't want to have any bloom, as we're going to use HDRIs. We don't want the lights from the HDRI itself to be overexposed because of this bloom effect. And then we have screen space reflections on, which allows the metal of the actual mesh to look a lot nicer. And other than that, I'm just going to set up my color to filmic, because normally it's the standard, or generally it's standard, but we're going to put it as filmic. So right now what we want to do is we want to open a new viewport in here and just open shader editor. Now this is the setup for each of these materials, for the dragon textures. So base color, ambient occlusion, and all of that just connected to a principal BSDF. Now if you want, just take a screenshot of this and you should be able to set it up. I'll actually make it a lot bigger so you can, sorry about that, so you can actually see it. So this is the setup for every one of these. The model itself is in the description below where you can download it with the textures and, as I said, the model itself that you can play around with. So we want to go to the world settings, and in the world settings over here we want to add an HDRI. Now I do get my HDRIs off of HDRI Heaven. So for all of you who don't know, you can just come in here and download a lot of HDRIs for free. They're quite good, quite nice as well, and this is where I get mine, for example. So I'm just going to Shift A to search for a environment texture, and then click the open button, and then I'll go where I have some environmental textures, and I've got some over here. So I'm going to use this Quattro Canti HDRI, and then with this in my shade editor, I'm just going to drag it into the background over here. So now if I open another viewport and switch over to 3D viewport and then go into render mode, then this is what we're getting. This is how our sword looks like with this HDRI background. Now what we also want to do is press Ctrl T if you have a the Node Wrangler add-on. If not, just add these two, texture coordinate and a mapping coordinate. This will allow us to rotate our HDRI any way we like it, which is quite nice. Now in the video that I made, I've actually blurred the HDRI in Photoshop in order to get that effect. But I actually use a different HDRI in that one. I just can't find anymore for some reason, but this one is quite close to it. So I blurred it in Photoshop. That's one way of getting that effect that you saw in the render, to have the HDRI blurred. Or we can do that in Blender with a different approach, which I'll show you how to do now. So in order to get this effect, which by the way I have no idea what just happened here. Oh right, I've just added a greater than by pressing the button to start the recording again. Okay, so with over here into the node, I'm just going to make this a lot smaller. Sorry about that. I'm just going to make it a lot this one a lot smaller, this viewport. So with that done, we just want to start adding some of our nodes that are going to help us to blur the HDRI. One thing to bear in mind is that our HDRI is actually not properly set up right now. You may think this is the only step you need to make just to import it, but the lighting is not actually true lighting as it should be. So we're going to correct that by adding 2 math nodes. So I'm just going to add one here and then copy paste it, so we have 2 of them. And then the first one I'm going to change to multiply, and the second one I'm going to leave it as add with a value of 1. And then I'm going to drag, the color, I'm going to pop it into the first value of the multiply node. And then I'm going to drag this value into the first value over here onto the add one, and then just pull this over into the strength. And now we actually have a proper HDRI map. This is actually looking the way it should at this point. So obviously you can play with these settings in order to play around with the lighting and how it looks like. Okay, so now it's time for the blur effect, which is not too difficult to do. All you need to do is just bring a noise texture in, and then bring a mix RGB, and we're actually gonna use 2 of those. And with that done, we want our vector from the our texture coordinates generated to go into the vector of the noise texture, and then we want the noise texture color to go into color 1 of the mix shader, mix RGB, and then this one over into the second color, while we get the mapping into the first color. So I hope you got that right, the way we've worked on these. I want to set them both to subtract, which is always difficult for me to see, right? Subtract over, see, second time and I can't see it. Right, now I'm pulling this color and put it over into here. So now, as you can see, our entire texture has been completely sort of decimated because of the effects that we've been doing. And we want to put this at a scale of 1, and then this one on a scale of 1 as well. Okay, so with both of those done in this way, we can now get the scale of the noise to 100. We can get the detail to, let's say, 16,000, the roughness to 1, and then the distortion, let's try 60,000. Yeah, something like that. So as you can see, we're having our background texture. It's not, it's not definitely looking the same as it should. So you see, if I bring it in that way, that's how the texture looks like, the HDRI, and this is how it looks like with this noise. And now we can just rotate it, but we obviously got it blurred. Now it's not perfect, I know, and it's definitely not going to look as good as the one that I've done in, blurred in Photoshop. But now I actually have control over this one, and I can play around and add all sorts of different effects with different textures and such, like waves or Musgrave or whatever you want to use. And the more you play around with these details, let's say, with distance, with the scale and so on, you can get an even more blurred out image. So by playing with these, you're just eliminating the abstraction, but by increasing these values, you can get different effects as well. Now again, there's no limit here as to what you can do. Again, you can play a lot with this, a lot of combinations, but that's basically how you can get this blurred sort of effect, and how you can just use this as a render. And now just for the actual render itself, it's quite simple. What I've done was I've added a camera, and then my camera is set up as 1080 by 1920 right now. I can just pull this, I can just press, go into walk navigation. In order to do that, just press the view, navigation, and just select walk navigation. But obviously you want to have your camera selected first, so press numpad 0. So walk navigation, I'm just going backwards, and it's all about just, positioning it whatever you want it, or however you want your scene to look like. Maybe something like that. Yeah. Now with the blur of the scene, this is also going to help quite a lot. Is you go into the camera settings and you select the depth of field, and with that done, you just select your sword or whichever part you want the camera to put a focus on. And as you can see, it's not currently focusing properly, so you want to play around with the f-stops until you can get a clear, crisp image there. So even at this point now, it's quite clear, you see. And this is how you can get more blur on the background of what you're seeing. So that's one other thing that I've done, as I said, is just set up the camera this way. And then I got the the object itself, so all these objects, I've got them to rotate in different, in various ways as the scene was playing. So, just animated on the timeline, and that's just basic animation of just getting objects to rotate. And I've also added a rotation over onto the on the background itself. So on this background, something like that. So it plays around with the lighting on top of the sword itself. But and you can just press the I on the keyboard to set up that point over there, and then go over to 86 or whatever and turn it around. And then if you go back to you can see how it's just turning around. And that's as basic as this stuff can get. You can do the same thing, as I've said, with the sword. So let's say the sword at frame 0 was in a certain position, which well, actually you'd want to join these all together like that. And then when you go into its shape, sorry, it's it's transform tools. So let's say it's at that point, and then you say at frame, I don't know, 93, it's at minus 90 or whatever, or minus 80. So then when you play it, it'll obviously move around like that. Now the environment is obviously moving a lot quicker in this scene, and again, the blurriness of the environment is not as good as doing it with Photoshop, but that's my method of blurring it quite a bit. And again, you can play around more with the blur by going on the camera settings, depth of field, and really just playing with these f-stops, something like that. As you can see, it's definitely having an effect right now, but also the sword itself has gone a bit more into a blur mode. But yeah, I hope you guys found this short tutorial useful, and that it helps you with setting up your scene a lot easier for product showcasing. There's a lot of potential into this, and generally the quality is quite good. You can do it with cycles as well. There's no difference between the two, and actually in cycles you'll get a way better result by using this setup here for true lighting, and also the blurriness of the background is going to look better, and obviously the sword itself will look better with cycles compared to Eevee. And you can add multiple lights into the scene to add a more more dramatic effect, or anything that you believe will help with selling that scene. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like, a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Please give me more tips as to what you want to see from my workflow, and I'll try to put it together.